We're dealing with a generational pandemic, something that the likes of people haven't seen ever, especially in our lifetimes, unless somebody was around back in 1918. How is this pandemic going to impact the way you go about the process of voting and voting as well?
So, as a young voter, my very first time casting a ballot for the President of the United States was in 2016. I was 18 years old. I was a freshman in college, and I realized that I have a power in my vote and in my voice. Now, as a California resident, I am very curious and somewhat intrigued, but also somewhat nervous about what voting is going to look like amidst Corona and COVID 19 and the global pandemic that we are seeing impact all of us, especially here in California as we see the spike in COVID 19 because of the lack of social distancing and the reopening of the state. I'm very curious to see how we tackle that. When I think to why I voted the way that I voted back in 2016, I was at the University of Iowa, I was a part of the Iowa caucus. I was so incredibly engaged in my civic duty and what that meant. But now, fast forward to 2020, a lot of the educational resources that I had back in 2016, I still have now, but a lot of that is changing. I was incredibly involved in grassroots efforts and the door to door efforts and the campaigning of local, state, and federal elections, right? But now, in amidst COVID 19, we're probably not as comfortable going to rallies. We're not as comfortable opening our doors to people who are going door to door and campaigning and giving those educational resources about the politicians who are going to be on the ballot. So part of me is nervous because of that, because there is a sense of disenfranchisement around voting and the education that you have to seek out yourself to understand who is on the ballot. However, on the other side of that coin, part of me is excited and energized because, as we mentioned earlier, young people are paying attention. And now we are going into the finite details of our local, our state, and our federal elections and who those people are to understand their policies. When we look at police brutality and what has happened, now we are looking to see what are the dollars that we are spending as local taxpayers to go towards police departments. That was probably not a similar conversation that we had previously, at least for myself. And though I think I'm incredibly civically engaged and involved, that's something that I wasn't looking at as closely up until now. So I'm interested to see how we tackle this issue and how politicians and elections tweak and realize that we're going to have a change. We're not going to have these large rallies and these large, convening of people to get the messaging across. So I think now we have to adapt to the time. And if politicians want to continue to have young people engage, we need to look at their social strategies. We need to look at how they're communicating with us. Because as I said earlier, 1 in 10 voters in the 2020 election will be between 18 years old and 23 years old. We are young people. We need to understand the messaging. We need to understand exact policies that these people stand for. So I'm excited, but also nervous to see the implications that this election has because of COVID 19. And I'm grateful to Secretary of States like Secretary Benson, who are cognizant of that and will ensure that voters have a safe place to vote, that they are able to vote. I think this will be a monumental and hopefully game changing upcoming election in 2020.
Yeah, just following off of what Miss Kimmy said, I think all her points are very valid. And the one thing that always confused me about everything is we spend so much money, on these, when election time is coming up, the presidential campaigns. We spend so much time and so much money on that. But it always seems that when it's time to get down to the votes, is always just such like a big problem with packed lines with not the best accessibility for everyone to be able to get there. And I truly believe that if, we really want to get every vote and let everyone who has, the chance to vote, and we're not doing voter suppression, I think a mail-in ballot would be, perfect for everyone because I feel that, even the ones who are nervous because of Corona, nervous because of the pandemic, they still will be able to put their ballots in the mail to be able to get it back. So I think in this world, if we truly want to see what the people want and it's equality for all, I think that is one of the easiest way that we can. And also, just with the times they're being shaky, I don't know how many people would want to get out and get in those lines. Like she said, it's going to be tricky with going to rallies and actually, sitting down and, hearing what the candidates have to say. So I think the best thing we can do is just, dig deep and try to, educate ourselves on the policies that the people that we're voting in, and, also just even something as simple as educating on what levels mean what, because, myself, I grew up in a house where my mom wasn't really a big voter. I don't think that she went to the ballots very often at all. So I had to personally, go out and try to educate myself, and, just being able for me to go down and walk with John Lewis on Bloody Sunday was one of the big reasons that I do vote now, because I understand that this wasn't something that just was given. This is something that we fought for. It's a reason that, us as black men, us as African Americans have to, fight for it, because it is so important. And me, I'm starting to see the more and more that, the things that we had to fight for, those are actually the important things in the world that we should educate ourselves on, because it means so much more than I guess a group wants us to really know.
Yeah, I think so much of the power of our history really informs how we can create change today and inspire us as well. And in particular, voting in this pandemic and enabling all citizens to have choices about how votes are, how to express their vote is really critical. And in the vast majority of states this fall, citizens will have the ability to vote from home, to vote without leaving their home, and everyone can find out exactly how to get their ballot sent to them and return it through their Secretary of State's websites, or through many of the other organizations, including vote.org, that's compiling that information nationwide. Here in Michigan, we sent everyone an application, so all they have to do is send it back, and their ballot will be sent to them through the mail. But in addition to that, we want citizens who want to vote in person to still have that choice, to still express that right. And so we're creating safe spaces for polling locations in partnership, developing creative partnerships with sports teams and others to create those spaces so that people can, if they want to vote in person, do so without fearing they're going to have to risk their health by waiting in long lines. And you're seeing that around the country, but also, we've got about just under 4 months until November, and every viewer, every voice, every athlete, everyone with a platform can call on their election administrators at every level for those choices to be made real for them, so that every voter has a ability to vote by mail this fall or to vote in person, and that those choices are real for citizens equally across the country.
And Secretary Benson, as we look at the information roll in terms of the disproportionate ways that this virus is not just impacting people, right? It's killing people disproportionately. The New York Times had to sue the Centers for Disease Control to find out that Black and Latino people were 3 times as likely to contract COVID-19. Black people are twice as likely to die from it. And as those systemic inequities kind of tick through our society, we realize that we are affected differently than everyone else through this virus and many other situations. And as mail-in voting is a safe option, is a good option for so many people, as we are affected disproportionately, it's going to happen financially as well. And more Black and brown people are going to be evicted in the coming months as their access to income is lost. And that's going to cause people to run afoul of several voter registration laws that require addresses to match up exactly. And there's going to be other obstacles, right, that affect mail-in voting. And again, I hate to put you on the spot of states that you're not involved in, but what can people do in those states to try to mitigate the harms that can be created by this pandemic that impact them disproportionately, especially when it comes to mail-in voting?
Well, yeah, I mean, critical to a healthy democracy is an informed and engaged electorate. And whether you're moving or changing locations, you in many states still have the ability to vote at your old address, or to vote in person, register at your old address. Secretaries of state have the repository of that information in each respective state, and there are universal themes of being able to vote by mail or vote at a local precinct, but there are local variations as well. So going to an organization like vote.org or whenweallvote.com that are committed to providing trusted resources of information is a way for citizens to be informed about what to do to ensure that their votes are counted. I think this is a moment now for voters to recognize that we all have to to dig deep and do a little bit more this year to be informed, engaged, and also to counter and push back on what will be very real, coordinated efforts to spread misinformation and potentially deceive voters about their rights, about their answers to all these questions as well. And we all have a responsibility as citizens and voters to get access to that real information, to demand that our election officials provide that to us and work with us to have full access to the vote. There is a great coalition of nonpartisan organizations, Voter Protection Coalition, that has a hotline, 866-R-VOTE, that anyone can call throughout the country to get specific answers to their questions about how to ensure that their vote is counted. So we have to be proactive as citizens and voters this year to counter efforts to both, intentionally and unintentionally make it harder to vote and silence voices that need to be heard this year. But if we do that, if we work together to proactively overcome a lot of those efforts and to be informed and engaged citizens, we can cast ballots in higher numbers than ever before, and again, transform this country and ensure that after Election Day as well, elected officials are being responsive to every citizen at the local level, at the state level, at the national level, because voting is just one part of the fabric of our democracy, and being engaged in every way is critical to ensuring that all our voices are heard and that our government's responsive. And I'll lastly just say we can't underestimate the power of the sports community, not just athletes, but in every aspect, every person, executives, coaches, leaders, sports analysts and media personalities and everyone who has a platform within sports has a very, very unique ability to help encourage, engage, and inspire all voters with trusted information about how to cast your ballot, how to complete your absentee ballot, how to return it by mail, and what all the local potential roles are. So I will really, I call on the sports community to be active partners with us, with those of us who are seeking to ensure everyone can vote this year. Help us get out information, get out trusted information, and really take this as an opportunity to lead voters throughout our country in ensuring their voices are heard and their votes are counted.
The conversational space created by these protests and the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others throughout the recent history here in America have allowed people to speak up. And that's a product of allyship, but we don't just want to stop at conversational space creation, do we?
We do not, Patrick. And I want to flip the term allyship on its head, because we need to stop calling people allies until they fully show up. I do not want the Black Lives Matter movement to become a Black Lives Matter marketing movement. We saw that people posted black squares on their Instagram page and their Facebook page, and we've seen companies go out with these strong statements against racism and against police brutality. But what are the policies that you are enacting as a corporation? What are the conversations that you are allowing as a non-Black person or a non-person of color in your everyday spaces? It's lazy to just be able to call someone an ally, or it's lazy as a white person to call yourself an ally, because what is the work that you are doing? It's beyond posting a black square. It's beyond raising a fist. It's beyond just attending a protest or a rally once or twice. There is an educational component that comes with allyship. It is not on Black people to continue to educate white people and non-people of color against the police brutality and the wrongings that have happened against our marginalized communities for centuries. The onus is now on white people to do the work. And we're watching. And I want to shy away from this performative allyship on social media, because you can post one thing, but that doesn't mean that you actually live out those ideals. I want true allies to walk into boardrooms, to walk into meetings, to walk into places that they work and look around. And if they do not see Black people and people of color in those rooms, it's on them to speak up. It's on people to raise their hand or raise their voice and say, hey, what you just said was a microaggression. What you just said was inherently racist. What you just said had a moment of unconscious bias. Once people start calling themselves out, once people start calling their friends and their families out, that is what true allyship means. This is a movement, and a lot of people are hopping onto the movement, but it makes me question some of their intentions, because why did it take a video of a police officer's knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds for you to wake up? The Black Lives Matter is not new to 2020. Police brutality is not new in 2020. This has been happening for centuries. We're lucky that we're getting to watch it on camera, and we sit in the guilt that comes associated with watching that on camera. But why are we just now realizing that this is an issue? If you were a true ally, and if you were a true person of the people, and you wanted to be amongst our Black community and the marginalized communities across the United States, this should not be your first wake-up call. So before we continue to call ourselves and we call other people allies, ask yourself, am I doing this for performance? Am I doing it because Black Lives Matter marketing is hot right now? Or am I doing it because I acknowledge and I sit in the power that I have as a white person and a non-person of color, realizing that I have had generational systemic equality that other communities have not?
Yes, just following on Miss Kimmi again, and everything that she said is exactly right on the point. I think it's been too easy just to be considered an ally. You know, just being able to post here and there on social media, just because you got out and you did one walk, just because, you know, you may have hold up your fist and put your arms around, you know, your brother on game day, that does not mean that you're truly for the cause. I think that that is very easy because, like she said, like, everybody knows we're watching. You know, everybody knows that, you know, us as African American, we're watching to see who's truly, you know, who have our back. Because, you know, I know as a football player, we tell each other we love each other all the time. We tell each other it's true brotherhood. But, like, what are we doing, you know, to affect policy? What are we doing to make sure that, you know, your brother is getting fair treatment in the world that, you know, is systemically set up against them? So I think that, you know, if you really want to be considered an ally, you come and you sit on the panels with us. You come and you go into those board meetings, like she said. You use your power, you use your privilege to call out the ones who, you know, overstep the line, or the ones who are not doing it the right way. You make sure that if you have any way to check, or, you know, use your power to call, you know, people of power, I just, like, you know, I appreciate, you know, Matt Ryan, you know, stepping out and, you know, raising $2 to $3 million for, you know, Atlanta to be able to, you know, help out the cause, because I know that he can easily, you know, stay in his comfort zone, and he has enough money to go hide out on, you know, a private jet or a private island, wherever he wants to. I enjoy and I appreciate, you know, him stepping out of, you know, his comfort zone to be one of those ones to show that I'm not with, you know, the nonsense anymore. I'm not one of those ones that y'all can try to pull me into a group of the silence. I want to see some of the people that we deem, or the people that we consider allies, to, you know, call these powerful people, because I know that if we were giving out jerseys, or if we were giving out tickets, it would be very easy to get in contact with these people. So if you want to really get policy change, contact them on, you know, the nonsense that is going on. Contact them on, you know, the terrible budgets that most of these states have. Contact them on, you know, things that really would help this world. Contact them on things that can help your brother, you know, live better, and not have to be fearful of, when he get pulled over for a speeding ticket, that he might not make it home to his family. So that what I can really consider, you know, being an ally. If you want to help us in that way, if you want to really fight this fight, don't just do it because it's convenient and we don't have anything to do and we don't have any sports to watch right now. Do it when it really matters. Do it, you know, this is a lifelong fight.
Yes, I think, you know, exactly what I was hoping to say, which is that the commitment to dismantling structural racism in our country is a lifelong commitment. It is one that requires discomfort, that requires a willingness to make other people uncomfortable. It requires a commitment to ongoing learning, and a humility of the lack of the ways in which infrastructures, whether it's educational or otherwise, have failed to ensure that white people understand the full range of experiences in our country that so many people experience every day, and the injustice that is real. for, in many ways, all people of color and so many in this country. But it is a lifelong commitment. And it is one that will lead potentially that people have to sign up for, knowing that it is not just uncomfortable, but it will require pain. It will require and likely lead to ostracization and a dismantling of your own privilege that has perhaps gone unquestioned throughout your whole life. And it also requires that you surround yourself with people who will call you out and hold you accountable to decisions, micro and macro statements, micro and macro that are made every day that can be better informed and more in line with what is needed to dismantle structural racism. So for everyone who is, right now posting and engaged in this work, beginning to read more, study more, and make a lifelong commitment to dismantling structural racism and addressing the generational trauma that communities of color have experienced since the origins of our country and before. But know that it will require all of us committing our lives to dismantling structural racism in order to actually see real and lasting change in our country.
Time to continue our ongoing discussion with regards to the movement for social and racial justice in the United States of America. Joining me today, some more esteemed panelists. We have the Secretary of State of the state of Michigan, Jocelyn Benson, joining us, as well as athlete and activist Ricardo Allen of the Atlanta Falcons. Also, NFL Network's own Kimmi, the host of Real Talk, an NFL program that you'll see on your social media feeds very soon, coming up here this summer. Thank you, all of you, for joining us in this discussion today, as we want to center around some topics that are pertinent to today's society, especially one of voting. And Ricardo, I will start with you. As so many people have taken to the streets in this movement for Black lives as well as racial justice, that's the spot that a lot of people land on. It's not the end-all, be-all solution, but it is one particular route. Can you tell us about the way that things have proceeded there in Atlanta and the state of Georgia, as there's been a lot of discussion on that topic these past few years?
Well, just to start off with, the protests and everything that's been going on, man. It's just been wonderful, and it's just been a blessing to see, everyone come together and everyone try to get out and do the part that they can. It's going to first start off with, just everyone showing that, this is a problem and this is something that we need to change, so that, for us to see that, everyone of all colors, ages, shapes, sizes, and forms, come out and, even during the pandemic, come out and come together to try to show that, the things that have been going on for, years and years in this world is not something that we're comfortable with anymore. And, it's not very much we could say that has, gone right this year so far, especially with Corona and being locked in these houses. But I can say that we have made progress, and it's been people, getting out, voicing their opinions, making sure that, we all understand that, what we keep seeing in the street, we keep seeing, Black men over and over, killed and nothing being done about it, on a judicial level with, the people who are doing it. It's been a blessing to see everyone come together and show that, this is not the old days. This is not how things are, gonna go down. So, for just the beginning with, the peaceful protest and everyone getting out to, show their support on social media and, just even passing knowledge and educating ourselves as much as we can to, help the cause. It's been a blessing to be a part of. And it's one thing that, I will not miss. And I will try my hardest to educate everyone I can, all my teammates, all my friends, all my family, and anyone who needs, any direction or any, education. I would try to find a way to get online, to research it, find the books and get them in the right spots. And now it's just trying to get everybody educated on, what we're voting for, who we're voting for. We're not just voting for, the president, which is always just like the top guy. We're voting for, the people who are under the ladder. We're voting for, the Senate, the governors, the mayors, everything that, has an impact on, the world. So the best thing we can try to do, and the best thing I've been doing with my time in my spare time, because we had a bunch of free time now with, the pandemic and the corona going on, is, educating myself on every level and the impact that every level of, political standpoint. I don't really know the, correct term for it, but just every level of, that I can, educate myself on.
And that's such a big part of things, Ricardo, as more people have become aware, right, of the functional harms that systemic racism causes in America. They become more active. They become more involved. And Secretary Benson getting involved, as we said at the start, it starts with voting for a lot of people. And Ricardo mentioned this pandemic, just another one of those obstacles, as well as the institutional obstacles to voting that many people have seen in America throughout its history. How do we confront those at the same time?
That's a beautiful thing. I think what's always been best about our country is when citizens come together and raise their voices to amplify injustices and seek to dismantle structural inequality, structural racism. And we're certainly seeing a global and national reckoning of that right now. And our political system needs to be responsive to it. The best way to ensure that it is by voting. And the fact that all of this is happening in the midst of a potentially transformational national election, with decisions being made at every level this year and decisions about who will hold power at every level being made by voters this year, it creates a great opportunity, if the infrastructure of democracy is responsive and accessible to all, to ensure that voices are heard and votes are counted all across the country in every community. So I'm very, obviously there's so much uncertainty right now in every way, and we're in the middle of a health crisis, an economic crisis, educational crisis, and in many ways a political crisis. But what gives me hope is that our citizens are demanding a better country, a better world, and we have two opportunities this year in many ways, certainly in November, to ensure that hope, those voices, are transformed through the power of the vote to real change at every level in our government.
So one thing that you mentioned was the word transform and hope. And I think that if we look at the instances of police brutality and racism that are happening across this country and the conversations that have sparked from all of this, it has really put the onus on the people to understand that this is a systemic issue and that we as the people hold the power to elect officials and to have accountability for the people who are helping make these decisions. Now, if you look at the protests of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the hundreds of other names of Black men and women who have been killed at the hands of police officers and at the hands of racism, the people are angry. And the people have a right to be angry because this is centuries of systemic racism and oppression. So now, by leveraging our vote and getting these young people involved and in the streets, if you look at Pew Research and they look ahead to the 2020 election in November, 1 out of 10 eligible voters will now be 18 years old. That was not the case in 2016. So I'm here in Los Angeles, and as I've gone to peaceful rallies and protests throughout the last few weeks and the last few months, I see that this movement is being sparked by young people. And I feel like now, as we look ahead to 2020, it is going to be on the young people to have that grassroots advocacy and that educational aspect, and realizing that though we are young, we have a power and we have a voice, and now is the time to leverage that and have accountability, have hope, and realize that this is just the beginning of a new America.
Before we go, I did want to address Ricardo with regards to one thing. As we talked about allyship and people working alongside us, there's been this conversation in the NFL about systemic racial injustice and police brutality now going for a few years. And we've seen previous administrations, try to confront this problem. And we've seen what some people might call half measures, community policing, meetings between the communities and police. Ricardo, you have taken part in ride-alongs with police officers. You've gone to the jails. You've reached out to them to meet them on their terms, to try to understand their point of view. How frustrating is it for you to do that and then see things like the 2 Morehouse College students being pulled out of their car for little to no reason, tased and beaten by the Atlanta police? They were subsequently fired. But how frustrating is it for you to try to meet police and those who support them on their terms and not see that reciprocated?
Yeah, it is very frustrating, and that was one of the things that I ended up talking to Mr. Gary Chambers Jr. today, and that was something that I talked about, and it was something that over and over we continue to try to give our time, and I've done as much as I can with going into the prisons or reentry centers, and I've done the police ride along. We've made sure we even done simulations to test ourselves on the same interactions that cops might have put themselves in, and I consider that almost just like being an athlete or a football player, because at any given time you have to make split decisions, decisions, and it's really fast, and the decisions that you make you have to live with, and in every decision that you go with as an athlete, if I go out there and I duck my head and I hit someone with the crown of my helmet, I'm going to be accountable for it, and I have to pay $25,000 the first time, $50,000 the next time, and up to $100,000. And over, our coaches would just keep trying to train us up on it, and for us to keep seeing the same things over and over and over again, and things haven't changed, it shows that it's not just the failure of the ones who are out there patrolling. It's a failure of the system. It's a failure of the way they were trained. It's a failure of all of it in general, because if you keep seeing this, you're not just seeing this in one state, you're not just seeing this in one city, you're seeing this all over the world continuously. It is very frustrating. But me talking to him, he said, you always just want to keep working at it, and change comes very incrementally. And I hope it comes fast enough that it's not, that we don't keep seeing, black men or any race just keep getting killed by police officers and police brutality without any accountability held behind it, and people still walking free. So, that is something that I really think that it really needs to be changed, and it needs to be changed now, because I'm just sad, and I'm saddened as a human being of the lack of value that we have for life.
Ricardo, as you've been involved with a lot of those young people, as you try to communicate and kind of be the bridge, I know you're involved with the Equal Justice Initiative, an institute there out of Montgomery, Alabama, and communicating between your teammates and them, and facilitating these discussions as they happen. What is your sense of what people are asking for? What's the main thing that you are hearing from people on the ground that have facilitated, these protests and these acts of activism in and around the southeast of the United States?
Or really, it just will be like the really equality, and that's the number one, first and foremost, is if you date all the way back to just systematic racism within real estate, or just passing wealth down to the family. It's just you know we us as black, African American, brown, however you call it, we feel that we have enough people who are qualified in the sense of being able to be higher ups in politics, be able to have better jobs, even to a point of becoming head coaches in the NFL. It's just, it shows over and over that there is a systematic racism and a systematic biases over and over, that it keeps showing that blacks itself are unqualified for the top jobs, and we want our chance, and we want our chance to be able to show that we can hold, and we are eligible, and we are capable of doing it. And over statistically, it's showing that us as a whole, we've been getting the short end for years and years to come, and that's not something that is sitting well with us anymore. So it's been cool to be able to bridge and connect with NBA players, baseball players, just all at the same time, because majority of the time when all the stuff that was going on, one season is going to the next season, and we're traveling to a game and they're playing the game, and if something was to go down, we wasn't able to back each other up. But now we're able to all bridge together. We're all able to show how we're strong enough together, and not just as one. So for us over and over to just keep fighting for just equality in every area, from being able to get housing loans, to be able to the education, being able to keep as much money in within our communities for education, being able to, reallocate, the funds within, cities and states and stuff like that, so that we can, use, take a little bit of the money away from, policing and put it into education and things like that. Because, over the years we've seen that it's been easy for, states and governments to cut, education and cut, health care, but, we're pushing more and more into, the budget of, policing, which we see that isn't, always the case, because a lot of things still haven't been handled on that area. So for us to be able to, just educate ourselves, keep using our power, just keep, showing that we do have, power together. We do have a voice. We do have, enough knowledgeable people to be able to, make a difference. We just want to make an impact. We want to make sure that we don't let this time go by, that we don't let this time go by without making a real impact, and not just being somebody who's just doing it because it's convenient. We're going to do it because we really do want change, and we want to see change, and we want to see more people like us within power.
So there is this collective moment of unity within the sports world, especially with Black athletes. If you think about both the NFL and the NBA, these are two leagues that are built on the backs of Black men, and we profit off of the likeness and the athleticism of Black men. So for me, as a woman who works in sport and a Black woman who works in sports and entertainment and in this field, it has been incredibly inspiring to see that there is a collective voice and a collective movement of both Black athletes and also allies who are behind this, and realizing that we have platforms and our voices do not need to just be on the football field. We've seen that conversation previously and have seen politicians and others attack athletes saying, just play football, just play basketball, stick to your sport. But beyond athletes, we are human beings first. And we are Black human beings first. And with that comes the power of knowing that we have a collective voice and a collective unity. And when you bring all of that together and present it in front of our greater society, people are seeing that we are fed up, and that now is the time that we're all going to come together to bring these issues to the forefront. So for you, Ricardo, and so many other athletes across not only the NFL, but other neighboring leagues, it's inspiring to see that Black men are sitting in their power and saying, we have had enough, and it is time that we have accountability and that people listen to our voices. You cannot watch our sports without seeing us as human beings first. So I commend you, and I respect everything that you and so many athletes are doing, because we are going towards a better NFL, a better NBA, and a better world.
Yes, absolutely. And I think as we look about this incredible moment that we're in right now, there's this question of, okay, how do we make it more than a moment? How do we ensure that the power, the voices that are speaking up, and the power that's being generated through those voices that transforms into real change, lasting change, that can lead the way to generational equality and reform that does away with the generational trauma that structural racism has developed in our country for centuries. And that's where the power of the vote, to me, is so undeniable and so critical to utilize at this moment. Because, as Ricardo was mentioning, people are making decisions every day that impact every aspect of our society, from access to schools, to healthcare, to jobs, to economic development and housing. And the people who make those decisions that affect all of us are chosen by voters. And it's been a historical disenfranchisement of marginalized communities that has empowered certain voices that have excluded others, and has enabled the longevity of a lot of the structural racism that we see throughout our country in nearly every industry. And so to me, it is so critical to use this moment as an opportunity to ensure everyone's voting, everyone's considering running for office, and recognizing that civic engagement, democracy, is also about more than just voting. It's about ensuring that whoever is elected is held accountable to the voices in your community, to the needs of your community, and are responsive to those voices. So now more than ever, we've got an opportunity to take this historic moment and translate it into real lasting change through the vote, through democracy. But I want to also emphasize, and I am proud that I'm a Secretary of State that oversees elections in Michigan in a way that is impartial and nonpartisan. But there are people out there who don't want these voices to be heard, who don't want to see this movement translated into lasting power and empowerment. And there will be voices in the coming months seeking to confuse people about access to the vote. How do you ensure your vote is counted? How do you ensure your voice is heard? And so we also have a responsibility, and those with a platform have a great opportunity to cut through that rhetoric and talk directly to every voter in this country about how to ensure that their votes are counted and their voices are heard, how to vote by mail if they're in a state that allows that, how to and where to vote in person in a way that ensures that you're able to cast your ballot effectively and safely, and to call out efforts and examples of suppression so that we do away with those as well and ensure that we're building a political infrastructure, a small d democratic infrastructure, that it continually enables every voice to be heard.
And Secretary Benson, I'm glad you mentioned some of that opposition to voting. Your state, Michigan, you guys within the past couple of years were able to enact automatic voter registration. As a California resident, I've had the benefit of automatic voter registration, but there are those in our country, especially in the wake of Shelby versus Holder, Shelby County, Alabama, as I mentioned, my home state, a place where I lived for 30 years, where 25% of the residents are Black. You are the second Secretary of State I've been able to have conversations with. One of the first was John H. Merrill, the current Secretary of State in my home state of Alabama, who said that automatic voter registration, he told me, was the easy way out. And when I pointed out the history of voter disenfranchisement in Alabama, I was told to, quote, get out of the past. And so for those who live in states that are traditionally disenfranchised, with high Black populations, especially in the southeast of America, what means can they use to try to counteract some of this direct opposition to Black and brown voting power that we've seen, not just in the past 30 years, but throughout the history of this country?
A number of things, but I think, first and foremost, you point out that those who are running our elections, secretaries of state around the country and local clerks, we're elected by the people. So elect secretaries of state and clerks and election administrators at the local level who reflect full and universal access to democracy, who recognize that historically voter registration laws were actually enacted as part of the Jim Crow laws in the 1870s and 80s as another barrier, particularly to African Americans to access to the vote. And there have been reforms like automatic voter registration, which simply just ensures that everyone is automatically registered to vote when they get their driver's license or state ID. It's a way to dismantle a historic barrier of voter registration that has discouraged people from participating who otherwise were eligible to do so. But the decisions that impact voter registration, or even how many voting machines are in a precinct or where precincts are, those are decisions made by election administrators, and those election administrators work for the people. They're elected by the people. And so paying attention to who is running your elections, encouraging people to run who have a commitment to access to the vote in mind, and who will be committed to ensuring everyone has access to the vote is a really important piece of long-term investment in making democracy accessible to all. Of course, there's also more. The Voting Rights Act itself, one of the most historical, important pieces of federal legislation in our country, has been dismantled, as you mentioned, in many ways by the Supreme Court, but still maintains a force of enabling any citizen to sue and counter discriminatory laws that have the intent or effect of making it harder for a community to vote based on race. So there's the use of the courts to protect the vote remains another avenue of after the fact protecting and ensuring our democracy is accessible. But then the last thing I'll just say is that, and I say this as someone who was a democracy, voting rights advocate, and attorney prior to becoming Secretary of State, is that we should never forget that as you look throughout history, our democracy and real reforms in our democracy have always come when the people demanded it. And in fact, they've only really come when the people demanded it. In Michigan, we only have automatic voter registration because voters passed a ballot initiative in 2018 to put it in our state constitution. So the power of everyone's voice to demand a democracy that is truly accessible to all is the most important, and in many ways the only vehicle that we've seen to be really truly effective throughout history at expanding access to the franchise and access to the vote and dismantling historic and modern day efforts to suppress certain communities or voters.